and I will serve as today's host moderator for this session. Voices is our storytelling event, and our presenters have agreed to share their personal experiences with you today. And we hope that by providing these diverse interactions, you will gain a better understanding of social barriers, obstacles, privilege as you listen and relate to these personal presentations. Prepare to check your perceptions. This is a safe and supportive environment, and we ask that you be open minded and respectful. We appreciate your cooperation and your enthusiasm, and we look forward to your feedback. As such, you're each provided a brief survey following the presentation, so be sure to provide your feedback. And before we get started, we want to let you know that some sessions with permission will be released from the speaker, and we will be recording this session. The recordings on this platform will take place on Whova, available for all attendees to view next couple of months, and then it will be transferred to the Penn State archives. So notice also that you have access to closed captioning buttons on your Whova window. If you're interested, you can select it to use throughout the session. Also note that all attendees are muted and cannot unmute themselves unless the presenter or host unmutes you. As you watch this session, we invite you to use the Whova engagement features. To the right of your presentation window, you will see a Q&A, polls, chats, and community tab. Please use the chat or the Q&A function to reserve your questions for the presenter. And also note that some of the sessions can be triggering or overwhelming in this process. We encourage you to practice self-care. And if you feel that you need to speak to someone, we have Han Wingate from our Penn State Counseling and Psychological Services who is available to chat with you today at 5 p.m. or at other times. You will find her information under the Profile of Attendees tab, and you can send her a confidential message. Lastly, we'll be monitoring the chat for any unauthorized Zoom bombers. And if there is an occurrence, we will have difficulty removing the person from the session. We will end the session. At that point, we'll need a few minutes just to restart the session in a new room. And once that happens, you will refresh your page and rejoin the session via Whova. For now, I would like to introduce you to Amanda Nelson. Amanda is currently a student at Penn State World Campus, where she's majoring in human development and family studies. As a leader of the Penn State World Campus, she serves as a World Campus ambassador and as a representative on HDFS Student Advisory Council. And her story today is entitled Patched Wangs. And with that, Amanda, I'm going to ask you to start your record button and start your presentation.
Hey y'all, wow, thank you so much, Leslie. I'm so honored for the opportunity to share my story with so many other amazing people that also have amazing stories. And thank you to everybody who has played a role in putting this incredible event on. Okay, before I begin, I thought it would be super helpful for me to define Wangs, because you're probably sitting there thinking, what the heck is a patched wang? Okay, I'm from South Mississippi, so everything I say has a twang and a draw to it. So wangs is really wings, like W-I-N-G-S. See, that was so hard for me to say. It requires a lot of effort, so wangs it is. This phrase came to me during my first year of sobriety. No matter how broken you are, no matter how much life has bruised you or beaten you up, there's always an opportunity to patch your wings and learn how to fly again. All right, now we can get started. Let me tell you where it all began. I grew up mostly normal. Nothing super traumatic happened to me in my mind, at least, except that my parents divorced when I was 4. At the time, I had no idea that divorce had such a great impact on humans, but I know now that divorce can be super traumatic for children, especially me. I bounced back and forth between both of my parents' houses. I was packing a suitcase every other weekend, y'all. I am a pro at packing now. Both of my parents did the very best that they could at the time, and I truly appreciate all that they did. They were both working very, very hard to make ends meet, but somehow I just did not feel loved. I felt just kind of shuffled around and invisible in a sense. Y'all, in the early 80s, There was no DISC assessment, no personality test, no 5 love languages for my parents to use as a guide to learn to love me the way that I needed to be loved. Perhaps they were out there, and I'm sure they were, but in South Mississippi and my environment, we knew nothing about them things. Ironically, my name Amanda means worthy of love. I just did not feel it for such a long time. This was my life from the age of 4 onward. When I was 16, I got asked to prom. Y'all, this was a huge deal because I was only a sophomore, and in my city, only juniors and seniors went mostly. I was so freaking excited. At our pre-prom supper, everyone was drinking. Up until this point, I had not tried alcohol before. I don't recall being forced or bullied to try it. I just wanted to because I was searching for belonging. Y'all, let me tell you, his name was Jack, and he was mixed with Coca-Cola. And when I took that first sip, I felt like I had just found the love of my life. My body had the warm fuzzies all over, and I felt all giddy inside. I never wanted to lose that feeling. I had no idea that that night would be so pivotal in my life. Nobody told me that by drinking alcohol that night, I would experience a battle with addiction for the next 17 years. The alcohol was all I could think about. It wasn't really so much the drink itself, but the feeling it gave me. I found that love I was seeking, and I wanted more. I began using drugs shortly after that first experience with alcohol because I was in search of anything that would make my mind, my body, and my soul feel that deep connection, that love that I was searching for. I began smoking weed, snorting cocaine, snorting meth, taking pills, anything I could get my hands on, really, all while mixing it all with alcohol. I was so consumed with trying to be loved by the substances, trying to belong anywhere, somewhere, that I was not even concerned about my behaviors. By the time I was a senior in high school, I had already been arrested twice. My dad did give me an ultimatum when I graduated, finally graduated. I almost didn't, but I did finally. He said, you either go to rehab or you move away from all these people you're hanging out with. So I chose to move to Florida. I changed geographical locations, but nothing else changed in my life. I found the same people doing the same things as I experienced in Mississippi because that's who I was. It was never in my plans or dreams to have kids, but I became pregnant at the age of 19. Though I couldn't see it as a blessing at the time, my daughter would ultimately be the one who saved my life. I eventually moved back to Mississippi and I raised my daughter by myself. It was so hard being a single mom. I was still using drugs and drinking alcohol, but I was functioning, meaning I still maintained my job and I paid the bills the best that I could. I still didn't feel loved though. I still didn't feel a sense of belonging. And the harder I tried, the lower my self-esteem became. The lower my self-esteem became, the more I used drugs and drank alcohol to fill the voids. It was a vicious, continual cycle. I bounced from guy to guy, searching for that love, and found myself in several abusive relationships. In fact, my third arrest was for a domestic violence charge. I was so tired of being bullied by these dudes and really just by life in general, so I decided to fight back. I was so drunk that night. I got transported to the local jail by a local cop who knew my parents very well. I was so humiliated and embarrassed. When I finally was booked into the jail, handcuffs were placed around my wrist and shackles were placed around my ankles like I had just committed a murder or something. To get to my bed, I had to walk down this long sidewalk to the facility. I couldn't take very big steps due to the shackles on my ankles. It seemed like this sidewalk would never end. Like I was taking a walk of shame. I was overwhelmed. I was disappointed in myself. I felt ashamed. I felt like a horrible mom and a horrible person. I felt like a complete loser. I got placed in this large room with approximately 30 other women. My bed was a metal cot looking thing that didn't have any padding on it. I used a blanket as my mattress and used my thin towel as a blanket. I recall one woman who told me she was incarcerated for keeping a child locked in a dog cage. Like, seriously, you kept a child in a dog cage? Where the heck am I? There was a group of women who kept asking me to take a shower with them. I continuously said no because I was freaking scared. I was scared to sleep. I was scared to use the restroom. I was scared to brush my teeth. So pretty much all I did was stay on my cot for 3 days without showering. And I was starting to stink really bad because all that alcohol was seeping out of my pores. But I didn't care. I kept thinking, I don't belong here. These are not my people. During this time, I had an amazing job at a local bank in the mortgage department. I was excelling rapidly despite my substance use, but I had to call my boss from jail and tell her that I wouldn't make it to work because I was incarcerated. I was so humiliated. My next experience with handcuffs came a few months later. My parents did an intervention on me and I was thrown into jail again while I waited on a bed at a recovery center. This time, though, I was placed in my own cell. That was a plus. My bed was a concrete block with a very thin pad as a mattress, but at least I had a mattress this time. My toilet was located in my cell. There was no curtain for privacy. So if I had to go number one or number two, I had to just do what I had to do. I was allowed to take a 10-minute shower each day, which was monitored by a guard. My meals were served through the slat on the cell door, just like how you see it on the prison shows on TV. It's real. I lived like this for over 30 days, and then I was transported to a recovery center where I spent another 36 days. And the days in sobriety, it's a huge thing because it's a counter. How far have you come? When I got out of treatment, I remained sober for approximately 90 days. I did want my life to change, but I thought I could continue doing the same things and get different results. I think we call this insanity. I thought I could just drink one little beer and be okay. But that one little beer eventually turned into me becoming a meth head over time. I just needed more substances to fill the void so I could feel like I belonged. The more I used, the more I needed. The more I needed, the more money it cost. And eventually I ran out of money. So I got this bright idea to steal checks from my employer and write them out to myself. I cashed 5 checks in total, which resulted in a felony embezzlement charge. Y'all, I became famous in a small town, but by making the local news. However, nobody was standing in line for my autograph. Instead, they were clinging to their purses and possessions just a little tighter when I was around. Rather than getting prison time, which I should have, I was blessed enough to get a pretrial diversion program. Basically, it's a program that gives people a second chance. I was placed on a payment plan to pay back restitution along with any additional fines to the county. And I was placed on a supervised community service program. I had to do things like clean the courthouse. You don't realize how nasty people are until you got to clean bathrooms at a courthouse. I had to pick up trash on the side of the road. I had to clean out animal cages at a local shelter. Once I completed the program and paid off all my fines, the felony is nowhere to be found on my record. I can even pass an FBI background check now, which I had to get to be in my current profession as a mortgage loan originator. The last year of my addiction, my life was like living a real life country song. Y'all know how they go. The sappy, wah, wah, wah. I got fired from my job. I totaled my car. I got evicted from my house. Don't forget this part. My dog died. My dog really did die. And my very own daughter, who I raised by myself, she was 12 at the time. She didn't want to live with me anymore. She decided to live with my parents for a whole year. On Mother's Day 2015, I was living with a friend and my daughter came to visit me. But I was so depressed. I hated my life. I was wallowing in my own self-pity, blaming all my problems on the whole world. I was high on meth. A side note right here, meth destroyed my life so quickly. It makes a person do things they normally wouldn't do, like stay up for days at a time, sometimes weeks at a time, obsess about thinking people are following you and seeing and hearing demonic spirits. At first, the substances, they make you feel so loved, like you can conquer the world. Then eventually they leave you feeling empty, like just a shell of a person. My daughter got so upset with me that day, she slammed the door as hard as she could as she left. Something about that slamming of the door woke me up inside. That moment saved my life. If you believe change can happen, it will. You just have to have the courage to make it happen. I was motivated by desperation. At this point, I seriously had nothing else to lose. I had lost everything and everybody. I decided I had to make a change to get my life back, and most importantly, to get my daughter back. I packed up my car with my clothes and just a few belongings, whatever I could shove in there. I only had $200 to my name. I moved from Mississippi back to Florida again. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a place to live. I didn't have a plan. I did have a desire to live a better life, but if I'm honest, I really didn't even intend to get sober. I thought I could just create a better life and still keep the substances in my life. When I first got to Florida, someone I knew was kind enough to let me live on a boat. So at least I had shelter and I got to wash my hair in a water hose. Ironically, the same thing happened as before. I attracted the same people doing the same things back into my life. It's seriously so crazy how that happens. I finally had to have a heart to heart with myself. Amanda, nothing changes if nothing changes. My daughter came back to live with me and we both started our journey of restoration. I was determined to create a better life for the both of us. It was so hard, y'all, especially having to get to know my daughter all over again. I finally had an epiphany and I realized that the substances, they had to go if I had any chance of living the life I had hoped for. When I took the drugs away and the alcohol away, I had to replace them with healthy habits and behaviors. I just believe in order to create lasting changes in our lives, we have to take the thing away that's causing destruction and then immediately replace that space with something that's going to bring goodness in your life. I had gotten a job back in the mortgage business, but I quit after a couple months so I could chase my dreams. I was listening to a lot of personal development at the time and I kept hearing, jump, chase your dreams, go all in. But the thing was, I didn't even know where my dreams were at the time. But I did it anyways. I followed their advice. I jumped, I went all in, and I quit my job. I seriously thought that because I was not getting in trouble with the law anymore, and I was trying to be a good person, that magically somebody was going to find my bank account number and drop a pile of money up in there. Guess what, y'all? That didn't happen. So during my first year of sobriety, on top of learning my daughter all over again, learning who she was, I got my car repossessed and I got evicted again, leaving me and my daughter carless and homeless in a city far away from my family. I felt like a complete failure. Like I had not proven to my daughter that I had changed. When the repo man knocked on my door, I was devastated. Me and my daughter had to put all of our belongings from the car into trash bags and watch him take my only means of transportation away. A few short days later, I got served with papers to vacate my apartment. We packed a suitcase with as much stuff as we could fit in there and left everything else behind. We walked towards some cheap hotels. I couldn't even afford one. Like I really didn't even know how I was going to make this work, but it was the best option I could come up with at the time. For a moment, I felt like I was taking that same walk of shame again, just as I had done in handcuffs and shackles when I was arrested. I didn't know many people in my city at this time to get help from. I was super paranoid, partly from the meth, and then partly because I was so scared to attract the wrong type of people into my life. So I mostly just stayed focused on myself and my daughter. That is seriously all I could handle at the time. Even though life was testing me, I continued to implement my new habits and behaviors so I didn't relapse. Drugs and alcohol were no longer an option for me. I had to sit and still do to this day, have to connect my mind, my body, and my soul daily. For example, I must work out every day, even if it's just taking a walk around the block, just something to get my body moving. I have to listen to some sort of personal development or motivation that stimulates my mind. And I have to stay connected to my faith. When we became homeless again, I realized that chasing my dreams, that's real cute, Amanda, but I needed money and I'm a single mama. So therefore, it is my sole responsibility to keep a roof over my child's head and food in her belly. At this particular moment, I was not doing a very good job at either one of those. So I became a server at a local restaurant where I made cash daily so I could afford our new home, the Candlelight Inn. And trust me when I tell you, this place, it wasn't no Ritz-Carlton, as you can see. This was a rundown motel with cigarette burns all in the bed comforter, but it was the absolute best I could do at the time, and it beat living on the streets. Being a server after having a successful career in the banking mortgage industry was a very humbling experience for me. But I learned so many necessary foundational skills while being a server that addiction stole from me. For example, I learned how to budget my money. I learned how to pay my bills on time. I learned time management skills and communication skills. Eventually, I was able to save enough money to rent a house for me and my daughter so I would have a permanent address for her to go to school. And I was able to get my car back that they repossessed. Take that, addiction. When my daughter first came back to me to live with me, it was so challenging. She didn't trust that I would remain sober, and rightfully so, because I had let her down so many times before. I remained present in the relationship, even when it sucked. And even when she told me over and over and over and over again how much she hated me. There were many times I drove her to the airport to send her back to my parents' house in Mississippi. I never went through with it though. Sometimes the relationship was so unbearable, but I was determined to show her that she was loved. I was determined to stay present daily because I didn't ever want her feeling the way I did. I did for so many years. I wanted her to see that if you put in the hard work, change can be made. Today, me and my daughter have a beautiful relationship. There's joy, there's laughter, and most of all, there's love. My daughter is the reason I fight so hard for this new life. She is my why. I have successfully achieved over 5.5 years of sobriety by implementing small changes into my life. I believe, like I stated earlier, that lasting change is done slowly and over time in one's life. Some days it's hard for me to believe that that was me living my own life. At times it seems like I'm watching a Lifetime movie. I have finally found the love I was needing by loving myself instead of waiting on the proper love from others. Oh, y'all, that car they repossessed, I paid that sucker off. I also paid off my pre-trial diversion, which was over $10,000. And last year, I was able to pay off both evictions. So that means I am completely free from my past. Take that, addiction. I am now a published author. I have a successful career in the mortgage industry, and I'm a student leader at Penn State. Y'all, the world voted me most likely to go to the state pen, but I'm a student leader at Penn State, you heard? I honestly didn't think college was an option for me given my past. I wasn't even sure that they would let me in the doors. But I am so, so grateful that Penn State took a chance on me. I'm learning so much about myself as it relates to my own addictions so that I can help set others free from their addictions in the future. For so long, I was broken, I was bruised, and I was beaten up by life. But little by little, I patched my wings and eventually I learned to fly again. There is absolutely nothing that we can do about our story, our past, except use it as a part of our story to help someone else along the way. Thank you so much. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you, Amanda, for sharing your story. I think that's a wonderful, enriching story. It's really a challenging story of overcoming your addiction. And you just mentioned you've been 5 years in
Yeah.
sobriety. So that's wonderful. I think we'll check if there's some questions, but you could start telling us maybe about the types of stereotypes or the prejudice behaviors you experienced, um, either coming through rehab or having to tell people your story or applying for a job.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I think one of the main stigmas around addiction is that people assume that an addict or an alcoholic, like we choose to do that. Like, I promise you, nobody wakes up and says, you know what, I think I'll be a drug addict for my life. Like, that's just not a goal that humans have. It just kind of happens. Like in my story, I wasn't feeling love, so the substances filled that space and they just grab a hold of you, and it's so hard to let go. So I think that's one stigma. Like, we don't choose this life. It just happens. And I think that there's just not enough compassion around that, because a lot of people look at us like something's wrong with us. How could you do that? Like, I think that's a huge thing we deal with.
Thank you, Amanda. There is a question in the chat that says, "What a hard and amazing story. Thank you for your honesty, and I love your take that addiction attitude. I have had many family members with years of addiction struggles. What advice do you have for a family member who wants to help, but they're ready to walk away?"
Hmm. Well, I'll tell you, one of the hardest things for me was when my dad cut me off. My family cut me off. Um, but I also look back, I was so mad at him for so many years. But as I look back now in my sober life, That was probably the best thing that should have happened, because I think sometimes as family members, we want to help so much, but sometimes that help is fine lined with enabling. So I would say speak life into your family member. Let them know they're loved and they're valued and they have great things to do in this world. But at some point, you have to love them from a distance and let them hit the rock bottom so that they can want to rise up for themselves.
Thank you. I think you also touched in your story that your family sent you to recovery and you felt that that tool of intervention wasn't really helpful or that you hadn't been ready for it. Do you have any um, hindsight about that experience?
That one, that was super traumatic for me because they threw me into jail, and then like I was blindsided. It wasn't like we had a family meeting and this is what we decided. I was blindsided. So it was very traumatic for me. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what was going on. And I think that that's why it didn't work for me. I had no say so, if you will. Um, a person has to desire to change in order to change. Like, we can want somebody to change, we can see that they're capable of the change, but if they're not ready to change for themselves, it's just not going to work.
I think that's true. You have to be ready for the change. It's true. In taking some of that ownership, because you did remark that you didn't even know how you ended up in jail, but you were there 3 times. And that people have to be really willing to stand with you while you're going through that because you're not able to understand quite everything that's you're experiencing at the time. So someone asked and said that your story is remarkable and inspiring. What else or could you recommend for mental health strategies?
Mm. Well, I have a whole toolbox because I tend to get bored with things easily. So I have to make sure that I have things in place. So I journal, I take walks. Nature's very healing and peaceful for me. Um, it seems like I go through phases. Like, I'll do one thing for a while, I get bored with it, and I have to change it up. So you have to figure out what works for you and just keep doing more of that.
I think that's part of the strategy for being resilient, isn't it? I
Yeah.
think you said too that writing helped you understand what you were experiencing. Eventually it comes and it pours out into a book, but it didn't start that way with the journaling or the techniques that you learned in recovery. So maybe you could share with us a little bit about maybe how you began journaling your experience.
Well, again, so when I was listening to the personal development, it did help me in a lot of ways. Document stuff. So in my book, you'll notice an acronym. It's CONNECT, and this is how I got sober myself. I was not going back to rehab. That was not happening. I didn't feel like I fit into the traditional area, like AA, NA, like for my whole life, I felt like I didn't belong. So I had to figure out my own path. And by just writing little notes every day, like, today I worked out. Today I took a walk in nature. Today I listened to personal development. And as I was going back through all my notes, like, it wasn't that deep. It was just, today I did this. As I was documenting, I was reviewing all my notes, and that's how the connect method was born. Just like, oh wow, well, I have to connect my mind, my body, my soul. Sometimes that's making a stranger smile, like paying for somebody's grocery in the line at the Wally World. Like, there's lots of different things. I hope I answered the question. Kind
I
of went
think
off
you
on a
did,
rabbit.
although you didn't tell us what CONNECT stands for. So share that acronym.
Okay, yeah. So connect means continuously connect to my faith. Only you need to believe. Nurture that noggin. New clan time. Energize your vessel. Continuously make a stranger smile and throw out help.
Excellent. I have another question in the chat. It asks, what do you feel is needed in the current recovery system for addicts? Are there any gaps?
Oh, that's a great question. Yes, I'm very passionate about this. I do see lots of gaps. One thing that I notice is when you go through a treatment center and you go back out into your life, there's gaps in like how to pay your bills, how to get your credit score up, how to buy a home. Like, how do we do the life things? I also think that the healing process, it takes a long time. And sometimes I feel like it's a whole lifetime. Like, I'll be healing from some things for my whole life. So in some recovery centers, they want you to get off drugs. So that's hard in itself. Imagine doing something for 17 years and now you want me to take that away. But in the same breath, you're asking me to face the thing that made me do the drugs and alcohol all in the same day. Like, it's so hard for humans to handle that. That's why I think change is done slow and over time. And for me, I had to take the substances away for a couple years and get a good solid foundation before I started even facing, okay, what got me here? Like, why did I go down this road for so long? What am I feeling? So I feel like people need to get a firm foundation sometimes before they can face the traumatic experiences. And then also, they have to learn how to live as a human in society, because sometimes getting a late notice, my credit card's late, I'm late on my rent, those things trigger relapses, in my opinion.
I think that's true for many people, not even just people in addiction. It's very triggering when you are overwhelmed by daily circumstances in your life. So I imagine that's only complicated when you have an addiction or multiple addictions that you're dealing with. Um, Thank you for that answer. We have another question that asks if you would just reflect on your book title again and tell us what's the meaning behind it. Like, how did you decide that it was going to be Patched Wangs?
Well, um, I had gone back to Mississippi for the first time in my sober life, which was very scary for me because Mississippi equaled pain to me. And it was scary because I didn't want to run into somebody, my old drug dealer, that would throw me something. Like, I just didn't want to be tempted. So when I faced my fear, like, my palms were sweating, my heart was racing. It was a very difficult experience for me. But as I was laying in the bed that first night I was in Mississippi, I don't know, I'm me and God are tight. So God just dropped it on me. Patched Wangs. I'm like, what? I don't understand. What does that mean? And that's when he gave it to me. No matter how bruised or how broken, like, you're gonna patch your wangs, you're gonna put some duct tape on them things, and you're gonna learn to fly again, and you're gonna be everything that you were called to be. So my title of my book, like, I just felt it was appropriate to put Patched Wangs in there, because that's what I've been doing over the past 5.5 years, patching my wangs. And I say the redneck way because even my editor that helped me through this book, like, it's not grammatically correct. And we left it like that because this is how I talk and I wanted it to be my true authentic self. So some people are like, I can't really follow this, and that's okay. But it's done like that on purpose because I wanted it to be as simple as possible so other people can get it.
Yes, and I think you said that about your intended audience. So somebody else wanted to hear about that. Who was the intended audience for the book?
My intended audience is the people that are still trying to make that first year of sobriety. I hated reading. I still don't particularly love reading, but I do it anyways. I make myself do it. So I made it super simple so people like me, that my attention span is that of a gnat, can, like, grasp a few words, a few principles in it and apply it.
I think that's very good application and keeping it simple while people are struggling and patching their own wings.
Yes.
Another audience member would like to know, what made you choose Penn State?
Well, this is another God moment for me. I honestly didn't have any intentions of going to college ever. But when things start appearing into my life in from different people or from different things that are totally unconnected, like for instance, this girl that I went to elementary school with, I've not talked to this girl in years, randomly messaged me, you should become a recovery counselor. And then on my mentor's podcast, Penn State World Campus was sponsoring it. So I heard that, and there was another place I saw Penn State. I'm like, I don't know. This is a long shot, y'all. I spent my last $65 to apply. I'm like, all right, we're just going to take a shot. I'm going to take a risk. They ain't even going to let me in. And sure enough, like a week and a half later, I got the acceptance letter. I'm like, okay, I guess we're going to school. And I had no idea how it worked. I had no idea how I was going to pay for it. I had no clue, except I just felt I operate off of my intuition, and I just felt this was the right path. And I love Penn State. I'm so glad that I feel like they chose me. So that's how I feel.
Well, I think when you're walking in your purpose, it feels wonderful. And I think with Patched Wings at Penn State, I think you've enjoyed learning how to soar in a different way. And I
Yes.
think that's true. When we talk about your story, you also mentioned the privilege that you had, right? Even though you didn't think you had any, you got to go to the prom before your time, and you had some favor shown to you from the Mississippi State Police and your family. And the fact that you got a diversionary program that allowed you not to have a felony record, that allowed you to pursue a full-time job. Can you speak to that?
Yes, I feel like that's blessed and highly favored. There's a lot of my peers in the recovery world that didn't have those opportunities. And if I'm completely honest, I couldn't speak on it for a number of years, but now that everything is said and done, when I moved from Mississippi to Florida the last time, I was not supposed to leave the state. My papers specifically said, do not leave the state of Mississippi. And I had to call the district attorney's office. And I was so scared. Like I thought that they were going to come get me, but that was just another instance where I was shown favor. And I'm just so glad. I just feel like when you're walking in your purpose, as you say, Leslie, like I feel like everything's going to be okay. And I'm not sure why I was blessed with all those opportunities. I'm very grateful for them because my life could have ended completely different.
Absolutely. We have another question that says, what's one thing you wish your family or friends would have said to you when you were going through the thick of it?
When I was going through the addiction, is that what you said?
Yes.
I wish that my family would have wanted to learn how they could love me in the way that I needed to be loved, even though I really didn't know how to express it. Like I said, my parents did the very, very best that they could, but I'm a very sensitive, emotional creature, and our family was kind of emotionally unattached, if you will. Feelings and such were not really talked about. And I wish that we could have been a little bit closer in that sense. And then also, I wish that they would have spoken life into me more. Like, you were born to do great things. You can conquer the world. You are valued. Just those simple things like that. I try to do that to my daughter. I don't know. She may say differently. I hope I do a good job just from my own experiences.
Well, you do mention and you talk about your daughter often, and one of our viewers says, thank you for sharing this amazing story. How transparent have you been with your daughter regarding your whole journey? I know she's walked it with you for most of those years. And what advice would you give to another parent who hasn't disclosed yet?
I firmly believe transparency and honesty is the right answer, though there's things I would probably never share to anybody. I would keep it to myself. But as a whole, I want her to understand exactly what I went through in hopes that she decides not to choose that path. So I'm transparent. I'm an open book. When she has questions, I answer them honestly. I don't sugarcoat it. That is one thing she doesn't like about me. I don't sugarcoat stuff. I just tell you how it is. Sometimes that comes a little bluntly, and she's like all the time, "Can you soften up a little bit? Just soften a little bit." But I just tell it like it is, man, because I just feel that's just the best way to operate.
Well, thank you so much, Amanda, for telling your story, and thank everyone for attending Patched Wangs by Amanda Nelson today. Please take a moment to complete your in-app in Whova, your evaluation, and we thank you so much for attending Voices 2021. And so, Amanda, you can stop the recording and we'll chat for a minute.
Thank y'all so much.